Alright, so now we're on to the actual compositing part. And what we're doing here is we're actually going to use, this is a final scene here, minus some little glitchy items that might be popping up. I also have this down res, so maybe those aren't even there. So what we're doing is we're taking our green screen character and we're putting him in the scene. And this is my scene. You can create your own scene based on these tools. It'll turn out, however it is you're liking. So as I set this to 1, you can see how slow this is going, and I definitely do have an issue here that's kind of popping up now, and maybe an issue there. I'll have to check the footage and see. But you can see I have the girls in the scene. Oops, too much zoom. And there's another girl right there. I use the same one. You should use different ones. I just did that for convenience, so I'd have it ready to go, but it's the same process. Now this technique is going to take us into a node graph that's going to look like this. Okay, so there's lots of things going on here. We're going to take it step by step, and as long as you understand the process of it, it's not really that difficult. Okay, just a matter of where things go. That's it. All right. So we're going to start off with this guy here, which is our piece of footage. All right. So if I look at this piece of footage, let me just pop my viewer over here. Okay, remember I can just hit 1, I just click on that piece of footage, hit 1, I used R to read it in, no big deal. I hit S to set my project, make sure it went to the keying folder. There's the name of my project right there, no big deal. I need to reformat it, that's number 1. Right now it's 3872 by 2592, so I'm going to go to Reformat. So I tip Tab, type Reformat. I want to reformat to 1280 by 720. Okay, if it's not in the list, I could always make a new one. And then I need to just tell it, right now it's set to the width. If I go to the height, you can see the height's going to actually streak these. And I don't want to do this to, distort, because then it's going to stretch it out. Okay. So width was the one that worked, where I don't get any streaking or stretching or any of that stuff. Okay, now what I need to do is I need to hook this up to a 3D camera. Because we're basically going to kind of fake rebuild this scene. And it's a very effective technique. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to add in a... actually, I'm going to set this aside. Just going to reference this and see, yes, that's what I did. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in what's called a project 3D node. So I just type tab, project 3D. And what this is going to do is it's going to take this image that we have here and it's going to shoot it out of a camera. Okay, and then we're going to use geometry that'll shoot it onto those pieces of geometry and give us a representation of it. Okay, just so you can see why we're doing this. If I added a transform node and I look through this, I can definitely kind of move this around. Okay, I could even kind of rotate this. Oops, not that way. Let me add a different kind of transform. Okay, I could definitely rotate this. Come on, there we go. Make sure I'm looking through it. To give some sort of appearance that there's depth, but there's not really any depth to this. I can even go so far as to skew this to tweak things even further. Okay, but this isn't really going to add enough 3D to it. With this project 3D, it definitely will. Okay, so all I need for this project 3D is I need, what am I projecting? That's what I'm projecting, is this, the reformatted version. And then through which camera am I projecting this? Okay, so then I just need to go and create a camera and connect it there. Now it definitely helps if you have the same settings from your camera punched into this camera. All right, and I'm just toggling back and forth with the space bar. So in case you accidentally do that, that's what I'm doing. So I'm just going to double click the camera, go under projection, and you can see there's a bunch of settings here that make it look like a regular camera, like if we were inside of Maya or another 3D app. So what I'm going to do is go to my desktop, go to my D drive, Sarcona, Winter, it's in my work folder, keying folder, it's in my stills, And I believe that's the one there. Yes, that's the one. Okay. So I'm going to right click on this and go to properties. Now because I grabbed this off the web, sometimes you won't have this information, but it definitely helps to have the information. Okay. I'm going to go to details, and I'm going to go down here to where it says 35 millimeter focal length. That's the number I want. Okay. So where it says 27 here, I want to punch in 27 there. Focal length. Focal length. Okay. There's this one up here. We don't want this one. This one is the digital one. This is the actual focal length of it. Okay. This is the, it was on a smaller camera, so it got converted, and so on. I also need to know the chipset size or the sensor size, and that's not listed here. But what is listed is the camera model, the D60. So if I go to Google and I type in Nikon D60 and type in sensor size, DP Review usually has great information, so I usually go to DP Review to get this stuff. So here we go, effective pixel, sensor size, right there. Okay, so the sensor size for this specific camera is 23.6 by 15.8. 23.6, 15.8. Yep. Okay. So now, why is this important? Well, just so we can see, I'm just going to create a cube. And in order for me to see all this stuff, I need to create a scene node. So I'm going to create a scene node. And every 3D scene, you have to have a scene node and then a scanline renderer. Okay. Now these look confusing. They're not. Okay. If you think of this like all of this here is going to be, this isn't it yet, but like this guy here and this guy here, these are, and even this guy here, so maybe not that guy, this guy and these things here are all 3D items. Okay, the camera is a 3D item. So what this means is that I can connect it into a scene, and basically it's just saying, hey, I'm using this as a 3D object that I want in here. Okay, now if I want to see what that looks like, I have to put it into a renderer. So I go to scene, so here it says object scene, and I can do just one object. I'm going to do the whole scene, and then hit 1 to preview it. And then what I'm looking at is the cube, because that cube is in my scene. If I hit tab, I'll go to that 3D where I can see it. And that's why I'm not seeing it, because it's basically the camera is right on top of the cube. Okay. So if I go in here to my cube, I just double click it, I can select it, and then I can grab this and move it. Okay, so I'm just pulling it back. I'll even pull it off to the side a little bit. And then I'm going to go back here, hit 1, come up here, hit tab. Okay, now it's not showing me anything in this viewport. Well, there's no camera connected to the scene. Okay, even though we have one here, it still has to be connected to the scene. So I'm just going to drag this little arrow to the camera. Oops. And then drag this camera node to the camera as well. There we go. So now we can see there's that cube. Now if I take this camera, and just so you can see it, if I adjust the focal length, it's going to change the perspective of that cube. Okay, so that's why we want to have this as close to what the original settings were here as possible. Okay, and the sensor size as well will also modify what that's looking like. All right, so these three are the most important: focal length, horizontal aperture, vertical aperture. And then we find the vertical and horizontal aperture here on DP Review. And then we find the other information by right-clicking Properties, Details, and so on. If you're on a Mac, go into Photoshop. That's my best solution there. It might be in the info, I'm not totally sure, or Google it. All right. So now what we have is let me just organize this stuff, because it's going to get very confusing very quickly if we don't do that. Okay. So this one actually doesn't need to be connected to the scene. I was just using that as a temporary. And it doesn't actually need to be connected to the scanline renderer when we're done, but it will be now. Okay. So let me just kind of reorganize some of this. I'm holding Control so I can drag out a dot. There we go. Okay. All right. So now, basically what's happening is we have our piece of footage. It's being reformatted to size, and that's being projected, okay, through this camera. So now, what is it going to be projected on? Well, this cube. I just connect the cube to that. And now if you look at the cube, let me turn this off. If you look at the cube, you'll see there is our stuff. Okay? So basically it's kind of like shooting it right on top of there. So what I'm going to do is kind of rebuild my scene this way. So it's very difficult to work in this view. So I'm just going to hit Tab. And I'm also going to double click this and turn my rows and columns down. I only need one row and one column. That's it. And I don't need this to cast shadows or receive shadows. Everything else should be good there. Yes. Okay. Now if I go to the node, notice how those boxes disappear. That can be a bit handy as we're working. So I'm just going to switch back and forth here to node and cube. Alright, so I'm just going to move my stuff around. And what I want to do is basically outline where that building is. Okay. So I'm just kind of lining up the corners. Now it may help. Let me go and stretch this out some. So I can just grab one of these points on top in the middle and just stretch it out. Do the same thing here. Stretch it out. Okay. Now the more accurate you are with this, the better it's going to be. Now I can see that as I'm trying to get close to this corner here, let me just pull it in towards the corner like that, is that I'm a bit off. Okay. So what I can do is grab the camera, and if I double click it, I get the move tool. I can move the camera, which moves the projection. Now if I want to rotate it, I hold Control, and then I can rotate that projection. And basically what I want to do in this case is I want to try to figure out where was this guy when he took the camera, and how do I get it lined up, you know, this exact thing. It looks like he was kind of shooting down the street. If I come into Nuke, you know, maybe this is, it looks like it's shooting down the street, but we're also a little bit tilted. If you look, it looks like we're tilted to the right. That could just be the street though. Some streets are like that. This line looks pretty straight, this line looks pretty straight, so maybe it's not that. But there's always a good chance that we're always tilted either forward or backward. Okay, so we always want to kind of play with this until we get this to be a bit more accurate. Okay, and maybe this is even rotated slightly that way. Okay, so that's our first step in this, just kind of go through and pop this building in where the building should be popped in. Okay, and you can see the building's going to be cut off. That's no big issue. That's just, you know, how it is. Alright, so that looks pretty clean right there. It looks like I have a good handle on this side of the building. The front maybe a little bit maybe slightly off, but I think it's workable. Okay, it doesn't have to be fully 100% on. Okay, you'll see how this method is going to work. Alright, so now we have one building, and you can see it's kind of projecting on the side and the back, and that doesn't matter. Okay, so let's also put in a ground plane. So I'm going to go back to my node graph editor. Okay, here's my cube. I can name this if I would like to. I don't need to name it right now though. So I'm going to add in, it's not a plane like in Maya. It's actually called a card. And there's two of them. You would think 3D, but no, it's this one. So I just connect this image to here, because that's where I want to get the image from. And I connect this into my scene, because that's where I want it to be connected to. Okay, and then I get this card. There's the card. I'm going to take this down to 1 and 1 rows and columns. That's all we need. And I'm going to rotate it. And I believe it's on the X direction. I'm going to rotate this so it's flat. Okay. Alright, and as I pull it back, you can see that, yes, it is definitely creating something there. And I'm going to come over here and scale this. Now I can use this, and it'll scale it up to 10, which is sufficient. I could also use these. These are virtual sliders, and what I can do is just click my mouse on either side of the 1 and use the scroll wheel and it'll scale it, which is a really, really handy feature. Okay. If I click it on the right side of the 1, you see how it does like decimal points. If I do it on the left side of the 1, it's doing the ones place and doing that. Okay. It's a very cool thing. I wish Maya actually had something like this. Okay, and I want to go back I want to go back pretty far. All right, that should be good. Now it doesn't matter that I've gone, too far back that way. That's fine. Okay, now it looks distorted. It looks kind of weird, but keep in mind that when I view this, let me hit tab here. When I view this, it's not going to look like that. All that's happening is these pixels here are just being stretched out, and that's why it's creating that kind of look. Okay, so you'll also notice that there's a gap between this and that. All right, so obviously I can move the plane up so that it's sitting on the ground. Now I'll hit tab again and see, okay, it looks like we're doing good. There's a big black spot here though. Most likely because my camera is cutting it off right there. Okay. So again, the ground could be, if we look at this, the ground could be slanted downward or slanted upward. Sometimes it helps to have someone like draw out all the perspective lines, but I'm just going to kind of tilt this slightly to get it underneath the camera. There we go. So now we have something here looking good. All right. And this whole thing, this could be brought into an actual like 3D app like Maya, and you could build all this geometry there, and it's, as long as you're comfortable with Maya, it's a bit easier. Okay, so no big change. Good. All right. So now I want to take this cube and duplicate it for the next building. So I'm going to come down here, and let's call this one right here building far right. Okay. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to hit Alt-C, which is obviously the shortcut key for duplicate. I don't know why it's Alt-C, but if you go to Edit and you go to Copy Paste, that also works. Or if you go to Alt-C, there's Duplicate. So I'm just going to connect that into here, connect that into here, and I'm going to rename this one to be mid right. Okay, so now we have a building on top of a building. So I'm just going to go switch to the node view, grab the blue, and just pull it over. Okay, and again, you're going to see that it's going to update with that image on there. So I'm just going to kind of pull it back until it's lined up with that building. I'm going to go back to the cube so I can grab this middle section, just kind of shrink it in a little bit. And again, doesn't matter that it goes way up here. That doesn't matter at all. I do want to make sure it's offset, which it is. Good. Okay, I'll do that again. Alt-C. Connect it here. Connect it here. And then this one's going to be close right. There we go. So we'll go back to tab. And I like to always just kind of pop in, look at it, make sure it's still the fakeness of it is still working, and it looks like it is. Okay, notice that we have these things here. We're going to see some differences. Okay, so I'm just going to scoot over to my other one just so you can see this. But I have basically cubes and cards for all those items. Okay. So all of these are already kind of set up already here. So just ignore the fact that I don't have everything here yet. I'm just going to drop in a couple more real quick. Okay, so I just dropped in. Here's the background, the ground, the buildings. This could go into further and further detail. For this assignment, we're going to keep it pretty simple. But this whole thing could be recreated building for building, and then this process done to this to give it, to take basically a still image and give it some depth. That's what we're doing here. Okay. Now, again, it's kind of like a gag joke or a gag thing, because it's not going to work fully 100%, but it'll work, good enough for us to do what we need to do with it. Okay. All right. So right now we're looking through this camera when we do the scanline renderer. Okay. So I'm viewing the scanline renderer. But what I want to do is I want to look at this through a different camera so that I can move around, because this camera's locked. Okay. I should actually go into this camera and right click on each one of these things and go to I'm just going to go here to selectable. That way we can't actually select the camera to move it. And unless we actually come in here and start changing values, then we'd be screwed. Okay. So we don't want to touch camera 7. We'll call this the do not touch. And yeah, that should be good. Okay. And we should actually call it projection 2. So projection. Good. All right, so that we have that. So now we need to create a new camera that we're going to use to kind of actually see into our scene and be able to move around some. So I'm going to create a new camera. And I'm just going to disconnect this and connect that there and delete this. Now, one thing we're going to see is that the gag gets given away pretty quick. You can see our truck is stretched here, and we have this going on and this other stuff. So what we want to do is get this basically to a starting point of where the other camera was. That way, because when the other camera was there, it was like locked on perfectly. So I'm going to go to this do not touch one. I'm going to go to this camera 7 one. Okay. So I'm just going to punch in the same settings we had. So 27 here, 23.6, 15.8. And then when I go to the camera, I want to copy these values into this. Okay. So what I can do is just drag this into here, and it copies it. Drag this little graph into here, and it copies it. Okay, so now we're basically at the same exact spot. And then this is our moving camera. Okay, so now we're at the exact same spot. So what we can do, just kind of shuffle some things around, is that if I look at this and I kind of move this around a little bit, you can see where the gag gets given away because I'm just moving it a bit too much. All right, but if I were to, let's say, move inward, oops, that's the other way. All right, the gag doesn't give away as much as long as I am kind of subtle about my movements. Okay, and then we can get some really cool things to happen with this. There you go. Now we're getting something that looks a little bit more like we want. Okay. Oops. Okay, so now we have this moving camera. So I'm just going to create a little animation on here. So I'm going to rewind this to frame 0. I'm going to set my first key here. Now I don't actually want to set it on this camera. Okay, I'm going to create it's called an axis node, but it's basically like a null. Okay, so I'm going to hit tab, type in axis, and connect that here. All right, so basically the good thing is it's zeroed out. So all we have to do is kind of play with a couple values, and then we're good. So I can close that. I'll go to my camera animation. I'm going to right click on the graph here and say set key. Right click on this graph, set key. Go up to frame 150. And I'm just going to give it a little rotate. Let's go the other way. And let's also push into this a bit. Let me jump into my 3D view. I just want to see how much this camera is moving. Doesn't seem like it's moving a whole lot. Now it is. Alright, so it's a subtle camera move. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You'll see that the gag's kind of given away. But I want you to see the process of this, just so you get an idea of what is possible. Okay, so it actually looks like we're kind of going down this street as opposed to just kind of like, you know, zooming in on it. We're actually getting a little bit of perspective and a little bit of distorting happening to it. Now you can see the gag's given away here. This lamp is now like bent a lot at the end, like that much. Okay, and it's basically because we didn't model that lamp to say, or that street light to say that's where you should be. So in the end of this, we can kind of crop it and zoom in and adjust some of our other stuff where we're getting a lot of distortion like that. Because this side seems pretty good, just the other side is very distorted. Okay, so now with this 3D scene, what's cool about this is now we have just this scene. So what I can do is I'm going to go over here to one of my pieces of footage. And here is Cynthia. This is all the stuff I did to Cynthia to cut her out. Okay, so if we just look at this piece of footage, there she is all by herself. And she's clapping. Wonderful. Okay, so now I can take this piece of footage and place it onto a card. So remember, a regular card. There she is. Now she's on this card, basically like a plane. I'm going to take my rows and columns off. Yes, I did reformat just to make sure. And I don't really see anything else in my scene. This is the reason the scene node's invented. Because right now we have this card, but it's not connected to anything. So once I connect it to my scene, and then I view my scene, now I can see everything. Okay, so now I can take Cynthia, wherever she's hiding, there she is, and I can move her into the scene. Okay, now before I do any of that moving her into the scene, I'm going to need to have like a shadow on her. Okay, so I'm going to do that here. So I'm just going to move her up to the ground like that. I'm just going to ignore the camera that's sticking through her. And what I want to do is create a shadow. Okay, so basically the shadow is just going to be another image on the ground that looks like, you know, her outline. So what I can do is I'm going to add another card, and I'm just going to say I want to use this. Okay, and I'll pipe that into here. It's difficult to see when we compound these lines, so I'm just going to offset this slightly here, just so I don't have that like that. Okay. All right, so now I have two Cynthias on top of each other, like that. I'm going to take the rows and columns down off the one. I'm going to adjust her. I'm going to rotate her so she's laying flat. Oops, that's backwards. And I'm just going to try to line the feet up. And this could really be any shape. I'm just using her body as it because I've looked at the shadows already in the scene. That's kind of what they look like. Is, you know, they're more like direct shadows from lights and not like stretched out blurry blobs underneath them like you would get during the middle of the day. Okay, so now there it is. Now it doesn't look realistic because obviously it looks exactly like her laying down. So what I'm going to do is first let me organize some of this stuff. Okay, so first here's original Cynthia. We'll just set her here. I'm going to hold Control and drag a little box node off that. Good. And then what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to add in a grade node. Okay, so I just added, oops, I don't like to add it there though. I want to add it in here, right there. So I just hit G for grade node, drop it in. And then what I can do is, so I can take the multiply all the way down, and it becomes totally black. That's what we want. I want to be able to control the transparency on this. And the only way for me to do that is to add this channel that has RGBA. Okay? And then the second I add that, it goes away. So I'm going to go to my gain here, and oops. Somehow my multiply got set down to 0. That's why I did that. Alright, so I'm going to go to my gain, and I'm just going to pull down this. Oh, I know why my multiply got to 0, because that's what I set it to. Alright, but what I didn't want to do is just slide the whole thing down. I want to slide my red, my green, and my blue down, but not the alpha. Okay, I can manipulate the alpha's value here or here in order to change the opacity of this. Alright, and we'll see how we're also going to tint it a little bit too. Okay, now we also need, right now it's too sharp, so we need a blur. So I'm going to add in a blur. And I can just pull this up. You can see how we get this blur underneath her. Okay, so now that we have this, we have basically, here's Cynthia cut out, and then regular Cynthia gets put onto a card. Okay, and then we have the, from the grade, we've broken it off, and we have another grade that takes away the color and softens it. And then we have this blur that blurs the image, and we put that onto a card. Okay, so it's great how we can like just add these cards in here. And if I wanted another Cynthia in the scene, all I would have to do is just add another card, connect it there, connect it here, and now I could have another Cynthia somewhere else in the scene. Okay, so I don't have to keep like re-importing the same girl and doing a bunch of stuff to her. I can just pipe it off of that area. Okay, so we have this, oops, right there. I want these things to always move together, so I'm going to add in a merge geo, and I'm just going to connect this, connect that. So now they're merged, they're like stuck together, and then I'm just going to disconnect these and connect this in there. Okay, so now this is my Cynthia node, and then I'm going to add in just, it's not that, I'm going to add in a transform geo. Okay, because the merge doesn't have anything of how to move it around, it's just merge, but the transform geo definitely does. So now I can take this transform geo and move it, and you can see how I'm moving both Cynthia and her shadow at the same exact time. Okay, so it's just going to make your job a lot easier manipulating both of these at the same time. I can take my uniform scale down, hold control, and I can rotate. Oops, wrong way. Pull it up so I can actually see the shadow. Alright, so now when I hit tab and we go back to our 2D view, make sure I'm viewing my scan line, I can see, hey, there's Cynthia. And yes, she's a little bit twisted, but we'll fix that. Let's go back to the transform. And we'll scale her down a touch. What's appropriate, you know, kind of eyeball it. And maybe a little bit of rotation here. And I just want to make sure, yeah, her shadow is still sticking through, so I just want to make sure that I pull her shadow up. Like that. Okay, maybe even rotate her around a little bit more. It'd be easier to go here and just kind of click it. There we go. Now if I need to move her up a little bit more, or her shadow up a little bit more, I can just double click the shadows card and just lift it up a bit more. Now it might be that I've made the shadow a little bit too transparent. So let's go to the grade, and we'll take this gain back to 1. There we go. Now we can see the shadow at least. That's what we want. There it is. Okay, and I'm not seeing it terribly too good because we're just so far away, but it definitely is there. So I can take it back down in the gain. We can still see it. That still looks nice. I'm even going to go into this gain and just add a little bit of red into that. All right, so it just gives it a little bit of a tint to it. So here, without the grade, with the grade. Okay. So now, like I said, if I needed another one of these, I could just duplicate that whole setup there. Or what I can do is just duplicate these things. So I can just copy this card, paste the card, copy this card, paste the card. And I'm just going to connect to it. So this is the shadow. This is the item. Oops. Add a merge geo. And just connect these two guys in. Add a transform geo. And then I can just scoot them wherever I need them. Okay, or I can load in a new piece of footage and just drop that in there as well. One of the great things about Nuke is just the ability to reuse and reuse and reuse the footage. Maybe this one will be a bit closer. So I'll put this one like right in front of the camera. Cynthia's belt. All right, let's scale Cynthia's belt down. There we go. And we can probably clean her up a little bit too. Just going to clean this up a little bit. There we go. All right, let's go to sharpen. And let's pull the amount. Oh, I'm sharpening the shadow. Oops. Yeah, sharpening is only going to do so much. In this case, it's not really going to work to have her this close, because it just looks really, really low res, because she wasn't meant to be, stretched out this much. All right, well, it's worth a shot. So let's go back to our transform. Let's pull her back. All right, so there's our other Cynthia just kind of hanging around. Okay, now they also need color correction done to them, which I don't know if I did that in this one. I did. Okay, never mind. They have their color correction on there. Remember, I color corrected them so that instead of them looking that blue, that they had that orangey kind of tint. Okay. All right. So the rest of that is you know, adding your own items in here. Okay. So that's what I did here, but I did create, you know, two different Cynthia things, because all I really have to do is just load this one in, and then I have another one. Where's Geo? All right. So let's go to the other side of this. Okay. So over here, let me just scoot all this stuff over. All right, so here is all the 3D work that we've done. Okay, so this is Cynthia's stuff. This is the building's stuff. This is our animated camera. And it all comes into this guy, into that scanline renderer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that scanline renderer, and I'm going to view it. And we get this, which was what we were looking at before. And then we can start to do all our finishing stuff to it, things that we want to add extra to it. So one thing I want to add is I like to add like a little bit of a lens flare or something here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and go to, well, if I go here, you can see where they're at. There's one called volume rays, which looks kind of cool. So I'm going to go to volume rays. Okay, and volume rays wants, you know, what image are we doing? And then where's the mask for it? Okay, so if I go here and I go to Luma Tolerance, you know, it's basically using the brightness of the image to pull this off. Okay, and I can do some stuff with it, but you see it's like way too much stuff is kind of getting bright or getting rayed, and it shouldn't be. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mask, and a mask is simply a black and white image of what we want. It's no different than all this keying stuff that we did last time. Okay, so I'm just going to create something that kind of isolates parts of this image. So I'm just going to click off and add a keyer. Okay, and just drop it onto that scanline renderer, and then view it. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just take the bright values and crank it up. Now I'm not seeing anything yet, but I have to hit A, remember. All right, so here it was before. So I'm pulling it up until I get those bright spots of just those lights showing. Okay, I still have a little bit of a street down here showing. There we go. So now if I switch back and forth using A, you can see how just the lights are in here. All right, so I'm going to go to undisable this, view it, and then I'm just going to connect this mask into that luminance. Okay, and then inside here, I have to say use the alpha edges to do that. Oops, sorry, nope. Leave that there. I have to go down to enable mask. There we go. Now we're actually using the mask. And then I can blur the mask slightly just so it kind of softens it some. And now you can see how I can adjust the brightness of this thing. Ray length, make it bigger. Somewhere on here is, that's my tolerance, I want that. Radius size, I can pull that down. I can change the quality up. I can do a lot of things here just to kind of play with what this is looking like. Okay, I could also, let me just delete that for a second. I want to see what this one looks like. So I'm going to add a glow to this and view it, and you'll see that everything is glowing. It looks, you know, very dreamlike because everything's glowing. So I'm going to use this here, and the mask is it's reading this mask in to kind of cut it off. So I'm going to turn mask off, and I'm going to go to this, and this is just me playing. This should work. No, I had a doubt, but okay. So what I have to do, let me just disable that, disable this. I want to connect this glow in, but before I do, I have to copy a channel in here. Okay, kind of like we did last time. So I'm just going to go to copy, or K for copy, and I'm copying basically the alpha channel from this into here, And I'm just going to give it a new name. And I'll call this lights.mask. And yes, I want to create a new layer. I'm going to double click the glow. And under the width channel, I'm going to go to lights.mask. There we go. So now you can see that just the lights are kind of like glowing a bit more. I don't want to tint them. They were tinted white originally. Let me go to this orangey color. And you can see it does add a little bit to the scene having that extra light inside here. I could take the tolerance up and adjust some of where it's happening. Let me shrink that down. I could take the width of this up some. I could adjust the brightness. Okay. I'm actually going to switch back to the what it was called, volume raise. There we go. So the image, oops, here, mask there. I'm going to move this guy up here. I'm going to tell it that I want to enable the mask. Actually, maybe I don't. No, I do. I'm going to blur the mask definitely, just so I get that. Good. And I can pull this gain up just to kind of brighten them up a little bit more. And then what I want to do is I want to drop this on top of itself, because right now it's just the volume raise. It's not adding it on top of the other stuff. Okay. So I'm going to go and add a merge, and I'm going to say merge the volume raise, which is A, on top of this. So now I get both. So you can see the rays here, and you can see the other stuff. Okay, now the ray, there's a spot in here that says radius size. I'm just going to shrink that down. There we go. Because I don't want the lights to be doing that. I want mainly this guy back here to be doing it. Okay, and then I'm just checking my start and end position. You can see that my start and end position are a little bit off. So if I rewind it to the start position, that's where the volume position is. So I want to make sure I animate it. So I'm going to right click on the graph for the volumetric center, go to the end of this, scoot this volume position there, and then just kind of pop in the middle of this and see, yep, that's looking good. Cool. Alright, so I like that. So just to kind of summarize what we just did. There we go. We added this volume raise. In order to get the volume raise to work on just the lights, I had to add a keyer, a luminance keyer, and then I just merged my volume raise on top of the original render. Okay. If you get, whiplash from bouncing around, you're going to bounce around. So just get acclimated to it. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to add in some smoke. So I'm going to go over to my smoke pillar that I have right here. Alright, there's my smoke pillar. Oops. And I'm just going to go with a merge. And that's going to be A, that's going to be B. Let's view it, and then we can see this smoke. Now I did tint it with this grade. Otherwise it was like that. And I did use my transform to make it bigger, because it looks funny at that size. Right? So I just need to go to my merge now and just pull this mix down until I get something I'm a little bit happier with. Okay, maybe you can go to my transform. And there's my manipulator. And just maybe section a different part of the smoke. Okay, it's really difficult to see just because of how slow it's going to start running, but it is doing it. Okay, What else did I do? Volume raise is there. I have a grade, merge. I did add a denoise in here. And I'm going to show you what that's going to do. If you look up here, let me make sure I save. I'm going to add denoise. And I'm putting this in an area that has just a lot of noise. And what it does is it kind of goes through and figures out what the noise pattern is, and it removes it. So that's it. So I just close that. And if I do a before and after, I'll disable it with D and re-enable it with D. You can see that it definitely got rid of some of the noise. Okay, now this is going to seem kind of silly, but now I'm going to add noise in. Okay. No. Yeah, noise. That was right. No, it wasn't right. Grain, sorry. I'm adding grain in, not noise. And then I'm going to just play with these, because you want to have some grain in here. I mean, there's hardly a piece of footage that doesn't have some grain. You just want to make sure that it works correctly. Okay, so I just basically halved all of these. And now we have this grain in here, and it happens over the entire thing. And so what it does, it gives us the illusion that these items are kind of tied together. See, because right now she just looks like she's cut out a little bit too much, and now she doesn't. She looks a little bit more tied into the scene because we've taken out the noise and then added it back in. Okay. And obviously her shadow could use some work down here, but right now we're just kind of going through the motions of what we need to do. We can come back and finesse things later. Alright, so this is essentially it, with the exception of the vignette. Okay. So I'm going to add a merge. And I want to merge this on top of itself just like we did before. So I'm going to add a dot node. Actually, I can just pull it off here. There we go. Just delete that. Connect this. There we go. All right. So now I'm merging this and multiplying. So all that's going to do is just make it darker. But then I'm going to use this guy as a mask to get my shape. So roto. Connect the roto to the mask. And then I can pull out these feathering points. Click the point, pull out the feathering point. Click the point, pull out the feathering point. Okay, now it's going backwards, so I can just come over here and hit invert. There we go. And that's looking pretty good. We have this. I can add some other stuff inside the scene too, but for now I think it's where I want to be at this stage. And then I can always come in at whatever area. You know, you don't have to do this in a specific area. But I can add a grade in here. There we go. And then the grade, like I've said before, is kind of like your coloring. So if I go to the gain, I can play with this and give it a different color value. So I can kind of emphasize one thing over another. So I'm trying to emphasize like maybe these blue lights here. You see how I can pull up the blue of that to kind of pour it in a little bit more. Without it, with it. Okay. So a totally different effect. Oops. Okay, you don't want to go anything crazy. A lot of times you just want to think of Instagram and, you know, what cool effects do they do on those and which effect would look the coolest and how do we emulate that inside of Nuke. I always look back and forth to see, you know, are you doing the right thing. I'm also going to take the multiply up a little bit. And the overall gamma, I think I want to pull these down a little bit. There we go. Just add a little more contrast in here. I think I want to boost that blue. Yeah, I think I'm liking the way that's looking. Okay. So that's it. Let's just move this viewer down. There's that. Okay. Now we go to the organizational part. I'm going to add a dot node here. And I'm just going to pull out some dots and connect these guys into it. Remember, it doesn't hurt to be organized. It only hurts you if you're not organized. And I think I've said it before, if not in this class, other classes, it kind of helps to be a little bit OCD about your organization. Okay, I don't particularly like that this is intersecting, but I don't really see a huge way around it. Maybe if I drag this to here, drag a dot node there. Yeah, kind of work my way around it. Wasn't ideal, but you know, it works. And then I'm just going to go here and just grab all this stuff like that, and then put a backdrop on it. This is Cynthia. And this is our building. Okay, there's our vignette. Oops. I don't need a one for that. Here's our smoke. And I'll leave the volume raised and whatever else there. Okay, you don't need to do one for everything, every single thing. So I do one for the major items. Okay, so that's it. So then we just go down to the bottom. We add a right node. Oops. And let's see, we want to go to the folder. Go to my home, my desktop, D drive. And then we'll make an out from nuke. And then we'll call this building or street keying underscore Sarcona underscore winter 14. Oops. And then dot pound 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 dot PNG. Okay, so that's it. So then we render. Input 0 to 150. I could always type it in myself, whatever. Hit OK. And then I'm going to let it go. And then we'll go in After Effects and just put it together. All right, so now we're back in After Effects. I'm just going to go and double click in my project window. Go to my desktop, go to D drive. And go and find my rendered from nuke folder, out from nuke. Grab the first one, make sure ping sequence is clicked, hit open. Okay, we're dealing with 30 frames per second, that's fine. I'm just going to drag this down here onto the new comp button. And then I can hit the 0 key to get a preview. It appears After Effects is doing a lot of thinking right now. Alright, so you can definitely see like the smoke going through. You can definitely see how we kind of lose the illusion right here. Oops. Okay, so like I said, we could go in here and scale this up a bit and maybe scoot it over some. A little bit more. Well, you can see how we get that look to it. Okay, it's not perfect, but with a lot more work, we obviously could make this a workable solution to creating this, and it definitely gives the look of this being a 3D scene instead of just this flat 2D picture. All right, so there it is. Let's go to Composition, add to render queue, and again we'll wait. There we go. And we'll click on lossless. And we'll change format to QuickTime. And we'll make sure this is set to H264. Come on. There's H264, quality 1. These are all off. Good. Good. Click here on the output 2. And we'll take this to the desktop. Oops. And we'll save this into our street keying Sarcona W14 and then render that out. Alright, so then we'll have our second movie all set. You can follow the same procedure for creating a screenshot here. Remember that we did last time. I'm not going to do the whole process, but I'm just going to kind of zoom in. And we did a Alt print screen, pasted that in Photoshop. Alt print screen, pasted that in Photoshop. Alt print screen, pasted that in Photoshop until we get the entire graph loaded into Photoshop. And then you just reposition things and then save it as a JPEG. Okay, so the movie's done. If we look at this, the computer's just lagging. Your turn-ins for this are going to be a movie showcasing the screening methods, screenshot of the new node graph, and a screenshot of the 3D viewer. So we also want to go into here and just take a screenshot of this, kind of showing off the 3D scene. Okay, so again, just Alt print screen that, and then bring it into Photoshop, and then save it, and we're good to go. All right, so that's our keying assignment, and it also covered a little bit of 3D as well.